This is Dr. S. the Legend. He's back. I want to talk about treason today because everyone keeps discussing treason, accusing this one and that one of treason. But before I do that, I just want to mention about previous podcasts. I brought up the subject of birthright citizenship, meaning if you're born in the United States, regardless of your parents' status, you automatically become a citizen. And I predicted that the Supreme Court was going to hear the case. And lo and behold, the Supreme Court decided to hear the case. And they're probably going to hear it in the early spring and come up with a decision on June the 30th. So, as we mentioned before, under birthright citizenship, and also the fact that we mentioned previously about the issue of affordability, and this relates to what is known as supply and demand. So as the supply goes up, almost always, the prices go down. Now it's been estimated there are somewhere between 15 and 30 million people in the United States illegal aliens. So if they're living in housing of some sort or another. So if they weren't, it would free up more housing and the prices would come down. And they get medical care. And therefore the price of medical care for everyone should go down if they weren't here. Same thing with food prices and the food stamps they receive. And they get assistance from the government. Therefore, people's taxes would go down lower at the state and local level. Now, we could have a system where we admit people into the country simply as temporary guest workers because there's, certain jobs that people don't want to do, and you may need to bring in people as guest workers. Well, that would be a good idea, but they could not become citizens. They could just come in here and work. We've done this before. And we could put a strict limit on which countries they're coming from. And in the news recently, President Trump has put a limitation on, 15 or 20 countries where people can no longer come to this country temporarily because of the issue of the fact that it's related to the issue of terrorism and the possibility of a terrorist attack, and these are unsafe countries, and the people from these countries are unsafe. So let me go into the subject of treason. Everyone's talking about treason, and nobody knows quite what it means, and I will explain it. It's in the Constitution. Dear old Constitution, Article 3, Section 3, and it involves the death penalty. Treason is a death penalty case. Only in levying war against the United States or adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And in order to obtain a conviction, you need two witnesses to the same overt act. And again, it's a death penalty case. And in the past, we've had a number of treason cases in our history, but we have not had a treason case since the end of World War II. And what has taken the place of treason is the Espionage Act, aka spying for another country or spying for the enemy. And that also involves the death penalty. So we really don't need to prosecute people for treason. Number one, we're not at war. And it's only applicable if we're at war or there's an armed insurrection. And that hasn't taken place in quite a long period of time. So let me move on to some examples. The most famous case involved Aaron Burr. His case was in 1807. He was the former vice president. President Jefferson disliked him. He was the fellow that killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. And he was accused of organizing some sort of territory in the Southwest And the conspiracy period was between 1790 and 1796. And his defense was that he only really wanted to farm the area. And Chief Justice Marshall presided over the case with a jury, and they found him not guilty because there was no act of war, there was no insurrection, and there was basically perjured evidence. His partner testified, and Burr was acquitted, which meant that it was difficult to pursue treason cases because of the fact that it has to be during wartime or insurrection, and you need two witnesses, and everyone's aware of the fact that it's a death penalty situation. Now, there were some other historical cases. First, we have Shays' Rebellion, Western Massachusetts, 1786 to 87. 4,000 rebels didn't feel like they didn't want to pay taxes. So they wanted to overthrow the government of Massachusetts, and they wanted to seize the armory in Massachusetts. So the government had to come in and charge people with treason, a number of people. 2 people were found guilty and executed, and others eventually had their sentence pardoned and commuted. Then there was the infamous Whiskey Rebellion, 1791 to 94, where in the western part of the United States at that time, people didn't want to pay the federal tax on whiskey. And 24 people were indicted for treason. 2 were convicted, but they were later pardoned by George Washington. Another case was the Taos Revolt, an insurrection that occurred in New Mexico in 1847. It involved the Pueblo Indians and a number of others that consorted with them. About 500 people were involved in this insurrection. And in the end, a bunch of people were charged with treason, and my understanding was a significant number of them were executed because it was an insurrection, and supposedly they were conspiring with the government of Mexico. And so the Taos Revolt. Now, we have a whole bunch of treason cases during and immediately after World War II. And I'm going to go through a number of them, mention these individuals, and tell you what's happening. The first was a guy by the name of Max Stephen. He was born in 1892. He was a German-American citizen. And what he was accused of, in terms of treason, he was accused of aiding a German prisoner of war who was incarcerated in Canada, came to Detroit, and Mr. Stephen hid him out. And Mr. Stephen was charged with treason. He was found guilty. He was given the death sentence on August of 1942. And then President Roosevelt commuted his sentence to life, and he died in prison in 1952. Then we have Robert Henry Best, born in the United States, 1896. He ran he was an American, I'm not sure if he's German-American, but anyway, he ran propaganda for Germany. He was indicted in July of 43. He was arrested in 1946 in Austria in the aftermath of World War II. And he was tried and found guilty in March of 1948, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. And he was given life imprisonment, but he also died in prison. Guys dying in prison here. I don't know. He died in prison in August 1951. Then we have Douglas Chandler, born in Chicago, Illinois, 1889. And he ran Nazi propaganda from Berlin. He was arrested in the aftermath of World War II in Germany. He was tried in the United States in 1947, and he was given life imprisonment for treason. And for some reason, I don't really know the reason, President Kennedy commuted his sentence, meaning he ended his sentence, in August of 1963, and he was deported to Germany. And he died in the Canary Islands in June of 1977. Then we have Herbert John Bergman, born in Minnesota in 1894. He went to Germany in 1921. He stayed in Germany. He ran something called Radio Debunk Nazi Propaganda. And he was charged with treason in April of 1949, convicted in November of 49. He was given 6 to 20 years. He also died in prison in December of 1953. Oh, we have a bunch of these people dying in prison pretty quickly. Sounds like Jeffrey Epstein. Then we have, well, not just all the males, we have some females. We got Axis Sally, Mildred Gillars, born in Maine in 1900. German-American citizen, also known as Axis Sally. In 1934, she moved to Germany, and in 1940, she started broadcasting Nazi propaganda. She was also known as the Bitch of Berlin. She was indicted September 1948 for treason. Found guilty by a jury in 1949. She was given 10 to 30 years and lost her citizenship. And she was released in June of 1961. Died in 1973, and she never repented. She always thought the Nazis were doing the right thing. Crazy. And then we have Tokyo Rose, Eva DeQuino, born Takuri, July 1916 in Los Angeles. She was a Japanese American. She had gone to visit relatives in Japan in 1941, and the war broke out and she couldn't leave. And she was tried for treason in July of 49 in San Francisco, convicted by a jury, and given a 10-year sentence. Her defense was, she said she did not broadcast propaganda, she only broadcast music to U.S. troops, and she said she was forced to do this against her will. And in 1977, President Gerald Ford gave her a full pardon based on the fact that witness testimony had been perjured, and she got her full citizenship back. So not everyone was evil. So let me talk about, that's treason. So the last treason case, to my understanding, would be Tokyo Rose. And we haven't had a treason case conviction since 1949, so I don't think we're going to have any more, even though everyone keeps talking about traitors and treason and stuff like that. Instead, we have the Espionage Act. Spying for another country or spying for the enemy. So you don't really need treason. You've got the Espionage Act, which involves the death penalty. You can get the death penalty for giving secrets to foreign countries. And I'll go through a couple individuals here. These names may sound familiar to you. The first guy, Edward Snowden, former CIA and NSA individual. He was charged with violation of the Espionage Act in 2013. And at first I believe he went to Hong Kong and then China and then Russia. And he's still in Russia. And Putin made him a Russian citizen. We want him back, but it doesn't look like Putin is going to send him back. Then we have a fellow by the name of Aldrich Ames, member of the CIA, a definite mole. A mole is a person that works inside our government that at the highest level that provides secrets to the enemy, in this case, the Soviets. And eventually the FBI caught up with him, and he took a plea. He didn't go to trial. He pled guilty, and he was given a life sentence in 1994 with no possibility of parole. And he is still in prison. He gave a lot of secrets to the Soviets. Then we have Robert Hansen, another mole. Remember, the FBI gave all kinds of state secrets to the Soviets. And he was convicted in 2002, and he died in prison in 2023. He was given 15 life sentences with no possibility of parole. And by the way, he gave so many secrets that we kept him in solitary confinement during that period, that 21-year period of time. And then we have another familiar name, Julian Assange, WikiLeaks. He was prosecuted for treason in 2019. He is still in England. The United States wants to extradite him, but the Brits are very hesitant, the British are very hesitant of sending him back to the United States because they don't have the death penalty. We have the death penalty, and we cannot guarantee that he won't get the death penalty if they send him back. So they're fiddling around, and they're keeping him in Great Britain, and who knows when he'll ever be returned in terms of extradition. Now I want to go back a little in time and talk about the Manhattan Project, the project to develop the atomic weapon, because there was a lot of spying going on at that time. Now what happened historically was, in August of 1939, Albert Einstein was a German refugee, and he was in Princeton, university there, and with the assistance of another individual, Leo Salazar, they composed a letter, and they knew a friend who knew a friend who knew President Roosevelt. And in this letter, and you can find it on the internet, 2-page letter, basically says, you know, we think we can build an atomic weapon, but there's also the possibility that the Germans are going to also try to build a nuclear weapon, because Einstein knew there was a German scientist by the name of von Heisenberg who was in charge of their nuclear program. History will show that the Germans never did acquire a nuclear weapon, but they were trying to. So we set up the Manhattan Project. It was headed by a gentleman by the name of Robert Oppenheimer. It may sound familiar because Hollywood just produced a movie called Oppenheimer. And on one of my previous audio podcasts, I go into depth about the movie and also explained about the spying that went on. So basically there were 3 locations for the Manhattan Project. By the way, there were at least about 500,000 people that worked on this project. The main location was Los Alamos, New Mexico, followed by Hanford, Washington, and then Oak Ridge, Tennessee. By hook or by crook, the head of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, found out about the subject matter of the Manhattan Project. I don't know how he found out, but he had his spies, and he knew that we were trying to build some sort of nuclear weapon. And spies were sent to get inside the Manhattan Project. Now, one of the spies was a gentleman by the name of Klaus Fuchs. He was a British citizen, naturalized citizen, that had come from, who had left Germany when the Nazis came to power. You have to remember, in Los Alamos, we had what was known as the inner sanctum, at least that's what I call it, about 12 nuclear scientists that were at the highest level. And the British wanted to get involved. So we said, okay, send somebody over. So they sent Klaus Fuchs. He should have been vetted. The job of vetting him would have been up to MI5, which is like the FBI here. So we took the word of MI5 that Klaus Fuchs was a straight-up guy and not a spy. Turns out he was stone-cold spy. He was in the inner sanctum, and he provided, as far as we know, basically all of the secrets to the nuclear weapon, to the atomic bomb, to the Soviets. gave them the whole design. The Soviets didn't have to build a nuclear weapon. Stalin just sent spies to steal it. Eventually, he returned to Great Britain, and he was arrested in 1950. For some reason, they released him earlier in 1959, and he immediately went to East Germany, which was a communist country at that time, because Fuchs was a communist. And I'm like shocked that MI5 didn't realize that this fellow was a communist. Well, the MI5 failed a number of other times. There was what's known as the Cambridge Five. Other spies in Britain for the Soviets giving state secrets. Now, Klaus Fuchs had a handler. This is somewhat comical. His handler was Harry Gold from South Philadelphia, a nondescript individual. You would never know that he was a communist and a high-level handler. And what I mean by handler is Fuchs supplied the secrets to Gold, and then Gold gave them to the Soviets. Now, Stalin wanted to cover all his bases, so he had another spy. And this fellow was named David Greenglass. He was not in the inner sanctum of Los Angeles, but he was an engineer at Los Alamos. And he provided some secrets to his sister and his sister's husband, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. And their handler, guess who? Harry Gold. So, eventually the FBI got their act together. They arrested Greenglass, they arrested Harry Gold, and Greenglass implicated the Rosenbergs. Greenglass took a plea rather than go to trial and have the death sentence. And I believe he only served 10 years, Greenglass, because he testified against the Rosenbergs. They also got Harry Gold. Harry Gold got a 30-year sentence in 1951. Greenglass was in 1950. And Gold was paroled in 1965. And he returned to South Philly, as we call it, and got a job, I think, with a chemical company, and returned to being a non-entity. Regarding the Rosenbergs, they were offered numerous pleas by the government to cooperate, plead guilty, what have you. So they decided to go to trial. And of course, as I mentioned to you before, Greenglass testified, others testified, and they were found guilty of espionage, and they were executed in June of 1953. So far as I know, they're the only individuals that were ever executed for espionage. So let me just conclude here for a second and reiterate some things so we all understand that it's not nice to call people traitors or treason, but it's basically archaic now. It hasn't been a case since Tokyo Rose back in 1946 or so. And it turns out she didn't really do anything wrong. Instead, we've got the Espionage Act. And the Espionage Act is something that is involves having classified information, but providing it to foreign governments or foreign powers or enemies of the United States. And, who knows, they catch these people, but who knows how many people that are not caught. Klaus Fuchs, for example, based on all his spying and the Ames and Hansen, people died because of them. It's not a good situation. All right, so I just want to conclude here and mention that this is, I'm doing things upside down here. This is my podcast, Conversations with Dr. S. the Legend. And you can reach me with this email, any comments you may have. Okay, and as you can see behind me are some fantastic rodeo paintings, and this is the artiste, and you may contact the artiste at any time as to the availability of Western themes, rodeos, cowboys. This is just a small sampling. I really like the rodeos and the West and cowboys. It always gives you a good feeling, and that's why I'm recording my podcast with the background. In any case, this is Dr. S. the Legend, signing off.